Yo, what is up, my dudes? My name is Storm Rose, and on this channel we put what's in here out there, and today is my April wrap-up. So, this is actually my first wrap-up I filmed on this channel because I usually don't feel like I've read enough to do a proper wrap-up, which is stupid because, you know, however much you read, you should feel like you've read enough to do a wrap-up of what you've read that month. But I never did. But this month I did the Owls Readathon, and we are in quarantine. So when I tell you that I've been reading, I have been reading, and I finished a total of 10 books this month. Count them, 10. And I know for some people that doesn't seem like a lot, and for other people it seems like a ton. But for me, this is back to what I would have considered like my normal reading rate in school, in like high school and probably middle school too, if I'm being honest. And so this feels like my normal, and I feel like I've been in a slump for like a year. So it made me very happy to realize that I was reading this month. So I thought that I would finally let myself do a wrap up. So the first book I read this month was, let me see, and not all of these were for the Owls because I was just reading so much that I didn't have to just read the Owls. So the first book I read this month was Autumn Magic by T.M. Cromer. And I read that book in 5 days, which this is not me actively reading it. This is just like how I put down the amount of days it takes me to read a book so I can know, one, if it was a more difficult read, but also things that make books difficult reads aren't necessarily that like I didn't understand them. Sometimes I'm not as intrigued by them, or I have a lot of things going on sometimes, but I just like to see how long it takes, because a lot of these books I read in like 1 or 2 days. But for Autumn Magic, it took me 5 days. It was 238 pages. Autumn Magic is the second book in the Thorn Witches series, the first book being Summer Magic. And it's about a group of sisters who are witches, and each of them is named after a season. Autumn is the eldest sister, and in this book she's facing her love. The curse, or the way the Thorn Witches work, is that each of them gets one lover, and that's the only person that they will ever love. And that's how all of the Thorn Witches are, even their father and their uncle. So her lover is the mayor of the town that they live in, and there was a scandal, an issue in the very beginning of their relationship, which broke them off, and now he's coming back for a second chance, realizing that he still loves her. Very good. These are very like lighthearted sort of reads. Like, they have, I don't want to say that they don't have a lot of substance, but I can be a little extra judgmental of romance books. That's not my typical genre, although I do enjoy them. Something about, I don't know, it's not that they lack substance, that's not what it is, but they always just feel a little mushier, a little nicer, you know what I mean? So that's what those are. That's why I call them lighthearted, because they make me feel, you know, they're not actually like, there's big issues happening in these stories. But besides the point, that was the first book I read this month. I rated it 4 stars. I've said it once and I'll say it again. My rating system is very lenient, and I hand out 5 stars pretty easily. So a 4-star means I enjoyed the book, and so if I enjoyed it, it's a 4-star. If it was okay or meh, it's 3. But if I loved it, then it's 5. So that was a 4-star. And then the next book I read this month was After by Anna Todd. And if you don't know what After is, I would be surprised. But After is a book that was originally written as a Harry Styles fanfic on Wattpad, and then was taken on by a publishing company, and the name was changed from Harry Styles to Harden. Yeah. So, everybody I have watched review After has kind of hated it. Excuse me, my hair is falling out. I'll be honest, I didn't despise it. It was like a super, this one was, okay. Romance lovers hate me. But it was another romance book, and this one put me in my feels because it reminded me of things. Didn't love that part. But I will admit I was a One Direction fan, still am a One Direction fan of them as separate entities. But I could definitely see the One Direction in it, which, I don't know, maybe that's kind of part of the reason why I liked it. But I know it wasn't an amazing book or anything, and the ending really, really pissed me off. And it might have pissed me off so much that I will actually continue the entire series to get the closure that I need. I could make that a vlog. I read the After series by Anna Todd just to see if she gives me what I need. But yes, that's the second book I read this month, and it took me about 2 months to read that. I started it last month, and then I put it down for a while, and then I picked it back up, and yeah. And then that is 582 pages. Yeah. But I only gave it a 3-star. It wasn't great, but I didn't hate it, so. The next book I read this month was The Darkest Minds by Alexandra Bracken. It took me about a week to read that. 488 pages. It's a sci-fi dystopia. So I wanted to read The Darkest Minds for a very long time, and I know that the first movie was made because my father rented it and brought it home. And if you don't know about me and spoilers, if something is spoiled for me, I probably can't read it. So I've had several series where the last book was spoiled for me, one of them being Divergent. I never read the last book of Divergent because it got spoiled for me and I couldn't. And there was another one too, I think perhaps Delirium, maybe? Is that the series where love is considered a disease? I think that one. I'm pretty sure that one got spoiled for me, and also the ending of the first book pissed me off. I have a thing with endings as well. But, so, when things get spoiled, I usually can't enjoy them, and I watched the Darkest Minds movie, but I loved the movie so much, and I knew that there would obviously be things that the movie left out from the book, because that's how it works. So I decided to read the series anyways, and I actually did get through it okay, because I waited like probably almost a year from watching the movie to read the book, so I could like attempt to forget some of the things that I saw. And like obviously they came back to me as I read, but it wasn't like I went into the book like freshly knowing everything that happened. And I loved Darkest Minds. Well, I didn't love it because I gave it a 4-star, but I really enjoyed The Darkest Minds. And again, the ending pissed me off. That might be the theme of this wrap up. I didn't realize, but I knew the ending was going to happen, obviously, because I'd seen the movie, and I knew that there was more series, so obviously it would get fixed, which is why I'm not like distraught about the fact that the ending pissed me off. So I fully intend to read the next book, and actually that's the next book I will be reading on my Libby. I already have it rented out. I only have it for like 8 more days, so I gotta read that, and I also have The Cruel Prince for the same amount of time, so that will also be coming up soon. So The Darkest Minds is about, there's a disease that went through the population of children in the United States. I believe it's mostly just the United States, and that other parts of the world have like maybe a couple cases, but it's not nearly as bad as it was in the United States. And this disease either kills the child within like a week, I think. It's very fast acting. Or the kids survive and they get some kind of superpower. And there's five different categories. There's greens, which are, they have higher intelligence than normal. And there are blues, which can control, like, move things with their mind. And there are yellows, who can manipulate electricity. And there are oranges, who can control minds. And then there are reds, who manipulate fire, I believe. So the first book focuses on the main character, who is an orange, but convinced her... Oh, also these children get put into camps. But this book follows an orange who convinced her reviewer, the scientist who was determining what color she was, that she was a green, using her mind manipulation. So she's been living her life as a green, trying to hide her powers. Then she gets broken out of the camp by another scientist who actually works for an activism group. And then she goes on a whole adventure where she meets other children who have gotten loose, and they work to try and find another camp where the children have come together, the ones who have escaped, to like live on their own. Very good series so far. I know it was pretty hyped up a while back. A lot of the books I've been reading are books that everybody else already enjoyed and loved and fangirled over, and now they've moved on to the new books, and I am behind. I am so far behind, and I am slowly but surely working my way to not being behind. That is the third book I read this month. And then the fourth book I read was The Baron the Nightingale by Catherine Ardeb. I don't know if I wrote that right. That took me 2 days to read. Actually, it was more like one night across the span of 2 days. And it is 323 pages. So The Baron the Nightingale, I don't know if this is as much of a huge, like, I know a lot of people know about it, but I don't think it's like as hyped up. So The Baron the Nightingale follows a child who was born at the in the winter, and her mother died because of it. But her family has witchcraft in its blood, magic in its blood. Her mother didn't have the powers, but her grandmother did, and she's the child of, is he like an aristocrat sort of thing? He's involved with the palace in some way, and like he's a landowner. Maybe he's a lord. Is that? I don't remember the exact politics of the story, but basically she doesn't act like a lady. She's like wild, and she has these connections with the demons, but they're actually the old gods, the old spirits that have been forgotten because of the move-in of Christianity. And so throughout this story we follow her trying to I suppose save the old spirits from dying because of a new priest who comes to town to spread Christianity, but really he just decides to spread fear. And this girl also has a connection with the winter spirit, who has stories about him that are both good and bad. And she doesn't know that she's connected to him. She doesn't like recognize it for what it is. But he has a twin brother who I believe is like the god of chaos. Madness is what it is. And he finds his way into the town, and she has to fight against him. Very, very good story. Loved that story. I gave this one a 4-star as well. And I immediately rented out the next book, but I believe the next book is actually about her sister, but I'm sure it will still have portions of her in it. But I definitely recommend that you read that book if you're at all interested. I'm pretty sure it's in Russian. The 5th book I read was Moonstruck. volume 1, and it's like, I think it's like Magic in the Cafe or Magic Brewing or something is like the actual title of the volume. But, oh, I was going to say what challenges in the Owls these books were for. So Auto Magic was for my History of Magic class, which I was taking. Okay, so for the Owls, I decided to double major to be a herbologist as well as a writer, and I also wanted to be an animagus. So I had 8 challenges. There was actually 9 challenges, but 2 of them were like the same class. I never gotta check off that last one that I finished today. Auto Magic was for my History of Magic class, which is for my writer degree certification. I'm not sure what it's considered exactly, but for that one it was you were studying witch hunts, and so you need to read a book featuring witches. So that's what I read Auto Magic for. And after actually was one of my classes. That was for my Muggle Studies class, where you're supposed to read a book from a Muggle perspective, as in a contemporary, and I after fit that category. And then the Darkest Minds was, I thought that I might read that for my astronomy class, the at night, but then I had to return it to Libby, but I got it back early, so I was able to finish it anyways. So the Darkest Minds actually didn't fulfill one of my challenges. But the Baron the Nightingale was for my Care of Magical Creatures class, which is under my herbology degree. And for that, you're supposed to read a book. There's something about, you're learning about the hippogriff, so you're supposed to read a book with a beak on the cover, and the Baron the Nightingale has a bird on the front of it, because Nightingale. So that was what that book fulfilled. And the next book I read was Moonstruck, right? Which is actually a graphic novel about, it is about a Latina werewolf who is gay, and she has a little werewolf girlfriend. I don't think they're actually together yet in this volume. She works at a cafe with a non-binary centaur, who I cannot at the moment remember their name. There's a lot of representation in this graphic novel, and what happens is they I'm really bad with names, but the main character and her girlfriend are trying to go on a date, but she also invites her centaur friend to come with them to a magic show, and at this magic show the centaur gets volunteered, and they end up losing their horse half. They lose their magic because the magician steals it, and so then they have to go and hunt down the magician to try and get the centaur's butt back. I will admit I did not love this story in any way. If you watch my vlog, you can see me complain about it a little bit, but I didn't. This one, truly, I feel like it did not have a lot of substance. I ended up giving it a 2-star, which I hardly ever do. A 2-star means I did not like it. I tend to be very good about picking books that I know I will enjoy, and I also tend to enjoy most books, so it's not that hard. And this one managed to make me not like it. So, but if you would like to read a nice, cute little graphic novel with nothing too much to think about and a whole lot of representation, then feel free. This book covered my herbology class, which was Mimbus Mimbletonia, and the challenge was to read a book that starts with M, Moonstruck. The next book I read this month was The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. Most people know about this book as well. The aesthetics in The Night Circus are amazing, wild, beyond belief. I loved the way that the visuals were described, and not even just the visuals, just like the sensory applications of this story are like so amazing. And I think that to see The Night Circus as a movie would be amazing if they could find a way to actually bring these things like visually to life. I will admit that it can be a little boring at times. The Night Circus follows two magic users. They're not called witches or warlocks, I don't think, in this one. But their parents, one of them is like technically like adopted, have been challenging each other for years and years and years, and they use their protege, is that the word that I want, I think, as kind of like chess pieces to compete against each other. And so they're supposed to see whose teaching methods produce the best magic users. And so this whole story is following these two protege who are competing, and their challenge is to create this circus. And so they make like separate tents with different attractions and everything, and that's their challenge. They go back and forth and do that the entire time. So there's a lot of really crazy, super imaginative, like dreamlike scenes in the book, but for a majority of the book it's just them creating the circus, and there's a little bit of like other whatnot drama happening within it, but it's pretty low key until the end. I'd say that the end is actually the climax of the story, and I said that I have a thing about endings, and this book satisfied my need for the perfect ending, okay? Everything has to be tied up so perfectly and nicely for me to be like actually like very happy with an ending, and that is exactly what this book did. It did not leave any strings unfurled, and God, that's amazing. That's amazing. That's exactly what I want, okay? So I was very happy with the ending of this book. I was thinking of giving it a 3-star actually, because I had been struggling to get through it at times. It took me a whole month to actually get all the way through this book. I did put it down like once or twice to read some of the other ones, but yeah, but I ended up giving it a 4-star once it was all said and done. I definitely recommend, if you would like to read The Night Circus, you most certainly should. The Night Circus covered my astronomy class, which was under my writer major, and the astronomy class, you were having night classes, obviously, so you can actually see the stars, and so the challenge was to read the majority of the book at night, which is not a problem because a majority of the reading I do is at night. So that's definitely what happened with that book. Also, The Night Circus, like, it felt right. The next book I read this month was Shiver by Maggie Stiefvater, and it took me 8 days, just a little over a week to finish that book. I picked it up because it's a werewolf story, and I really do tend to enjoy werewolf stories. I actually had 2 werewolf stories this month. I didn't realize that. And I know that it was like a basic that everybody read like forever ago. Shiver was very old news. Maggie Stiefvater has another series that everyone loves. Raven Boys, maybe? But I picked it up because I needed something to fulfill my shape-shifting challenge, which was for my animagus. I needed to take Transfiguration, where they were actually doing an animagus lecture, so you needed a book that featured shape-shifting. And originally, I had picked up A Discovery of Witches to fulfill this challenge, because when I looked on Google, it said that there was shape-shifting in it. I'll tell you right now, that's not true. There is not shape-shifting in Discovery of Witches. And when I got 47% of the way through Discovery of Witches, I figured out that I did not believe that there was going to be any shapeshifting. So I decided to pick up Shiver instead, and I probably about 20% in, I realized that I had already read Shiver. Shiver follows a girl who was bitten by wolves when she was very young, and they were actually werewolves, but she never turned, and they don't really understand why. But then her wolf, there was one specific wolf that saved her from actually getting killed. These specific types of werewolves, they only turn to wolves when it's cold. So in the summertime they become humans again, and she meets her wolf in human form, and she falls in love with him. It was okay. I gave it a 3-star. Yeah. And here's where I stopped recording it into my reading log, so let's switch over to Goodreads. But the next book that I read this month was A Curse So Dark and Lonely by Bridget Kimmerer. I typed Bidget. Her name is most certainly not Bidget. I read that in one day. Actually, I read it in more like 7 hours. The instant I started reading it, I couldn't put it down. I loved that book so much, and I do tend to have a sweet spot for Beauty and the Beast retellings, which is what A Curse So Dark and Lonely is. A Curse So Dark and Lonely follows a main character who has cerebral palsy. Yeah, her name is Harper, and she gets kidnapped by the commander of the King's Guard, because the king has to take a woman every season for him to attempt to get her to fall in love with him so that he can break the curse, blah 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 blah. You know how Beauty and the Beast works. The king is human, but he turns into a beast at the end of the season, and when he turns into a beast, he loses control of himself and ends up attacking his citizens. Also, his sorceress continues to play with his mind throughout the whole story. She doesn't just curse him and leave him be. I loved this story, and seeing the way that Harper like grew into her position and everything, amazing. Again, this was another book that the ending made me quite upset. And I'm not excited to read the next book, even though it will feature Grey very heavily, because I think it's going to be quite sad. So, but I do have that book on hold on Libby as well. But I think that's the longest hold that I have. It won't be here for like 26 weeks. I gave it a 4-star. Once again, very good book. Super good book. And it didn't fulfill any of my challenges, however. The next book I read was A Discovery of Witches. I actually got to finish that book. Oh! I completely skipped over. Did I not review it? Ah, I didn't. Another one of the challenges that I had for the owls was my potions class, which I had both for my animagus training as well as my herbologist training. In the potions class, we were doing a shrinking solution, and so the challenge was to read a book that was under 150 pages. So I read one You Cant Forget, which is a Satan Spawn motorcycle club romance. I'd say it was probably about a 3-star. It wasn't anything amazing. One You Can't Forget, it's, they had a little fling a while back, but then her family forbid her from being with him because he was bad news and he got in a wreck. And they'd been separated for a long time, and then suddenly they rekindle things. Yeah, but that fulfilled my potions class for 2 of my challenges. So I started Discovery, which is a little bit last month, and then I put it down because I had to return it. I was very much into the story when it got returned, so when I got it back, after I finished the books that I needed to read besides that, I read that right away. Again, super good book, very much enjoyed it, 4-star read. It follows a bishop, you know, if you know your witchness. Bishop, I think it's Bridget Bishop, was one of the witches burned, one of the witches killed in Salem. She's a descendant, but she refuses to acknowledge her magic, and it's an academia book, which I have this weird fascination and love for academia, and like I honestly kind of wish that I could be that, but at the same time I just don't think I'm cut out to be in the academia world. So this fulfilled that part of it, and it also had witches and also vampires and demons. There are 4 species of creatures, one being humans, and then vampires, demons, and witches, and they all have a lot of animosity, except the humans are dumb and don't know what's going on, as per usual. The main character has to face her magic because it starts coming out, and she meets a vampire, vampire named Matthew, who has been alive since 500. Yeah, very old dude, and Diana is a historian of alchemy, so she very much enjoys meeting this vampire because he gets to tell her about all the stuff he has up in his noggin from the past, and they fall in love, as is wont to happen in books featuring creatures. in most books of anything, actually, if we're being honest. She encounters a manuscript, an alchemical manuscript, in her studies that is enchanted, and apparently every creature on the planet wants this book because they believe that it has something that they want. The witches believe it is the first grimoire, whereas Matthew believes it is the origin story of all creatures, which makes a lot more sense. And they go through the story of trying to protect Diana as she begins to understand her magic, and also to protect each other because of their love, which is forbidden, of course. Very good story, super happy with it. Also have put a hold on the next book for that. And then last night and today I read Big Magic by Gilbert, something Gilbert. Elizabeth Gilbert. Big Magic is a self-help book about how to live your life creatively and how to reject fear. Not to destroy or fight your fear, but to reject your fears in order to live a creative life, and how you can be a creative person without being the tortured artist, and how it can be fun. I loved this book, loved it so much in fact that I did give it a 5-star. It's exactly what I wanted. This self-help book was supposed to be, this fit my non-fiction challenge. For my animagus training I needed an arithmancy class, which was the magic of 2, which was discussing balance, and so you needed to pick a genre that you don't typically read, and a genre that I hardly ever read is nonfiction. So that is what I did. I'm very excited that I read it because it was very helpful and there's a lot that I will be taking from it. And I had intended to read The Power of Now, my bad, for that challenge. I started it, I got 21% into The Power of Now, and I really kind of hated it. Not gonna lie. I know a lot of people have read The Power of Now and said that it was very helpful, but if you want to hear me complain about it, you can watch my blog. But that is all 10 of the books that I read this month. But yeah. So with that, I bid you adieu till the next Howdy Do. Peace. See ya.
Intelligence. Nothing has caused the human race so much trouble as intelligence.